Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast, and enough with the foreplay. The top 50 under Bill Belichick has been unleashed. So far, we got 20 in front of your eyeballs, and there's plenty to go through. Thank you to everybody who's given so much feedback back. Thank you to everybody who has bones to pick. And thank you to Phil Perry for holding my hand throughout the entire process. And also the Skull Crusher, John Henry, who's busted his ass on producing pods, videos, and content too. Phil, this has been fun. And it's funny because every time somebody does pick a bone with me, they do make compelling enough arguments to make me say, well, I mean, I can see what you're saying.
And you know what? I appreciate the fact that you have reached out to so many over the course of putting this together, because this is an exhaustive process. And I don't think that there was any more research you really could have done, any more in the way of opinion that you could have sought out. So a credit to you in putting this thing together. And I actually, while you're giving yourself that pat on the back, it's going to be hard for me to find bones to pick, because I agree with a lot of this here, but bones to pick there are. So don't you worry about that.
All right, let's rip through the top five then. Brady, obviously, number one. No further ado. Number two, Vince Wilfork. Number three, Teddy Bruschi. Number four, Julian Edelman. Number five, Troy Brown. Edelman cracking the top five. He was 20 in 2015. Brown gets leapfrogged. He goes from 4 to 5. Wilfork is always somebody who people contend, what, why? So any bones to pick there, Phil, with that top five, or whys about it?
Well, so I like Wilfork it too, for all the reasons that you've listed, and we've talked about this before, but the fact that he bridged the first dynasty to the second, the fact that he was considered one of the best at his position, really one of the best defenders, period, for a stretch, the fact that he won 2 Super Bowls. I have no problem with Wilfork at number 2. And this is going to be a small debate here because they're only separated by one position. But Teddy Bruschi and Julian Edelman are sort of similar types of players to me, in that they are the heart and soul in some ways of their teams when they were playing opposite sides of the ball. But neither guy was ever an All-Pro. I think Bruschi had 1 Pro Bowl. Edelman never had one. Edelman was really critically important to the 3 Super Bowl wins that he was 100%. A part of. And I know Bruschi was too, but was he as important as Edelman? So that's the first question that I have. Should Edelman and Bruschi not be flipped?
Great point. I'm going with what Christian Fourier described as the Lewis and Clark factor. Bruschi bridging the gap from being drafted by Parcells in 1996, going through the Pete Carroll years, then reinventing himself in 2001 from a defensive end, outside linebacker, to the middle linebacker in the 4-3 in the playoffs. Comes back from a stroke. I mean, the Lazarus story to it. So, and actually started 16 games in 2007, 2 years after the stroke. So, yeah, I mean, you could do that, but I think I wanted to give a nod to the generations in a way. And I would have had a hard time popping Edelman over one of those OP original Patriots. So that's why we got Bruschi ahead of Edelman, but it's a bone worth picking because you can't come up with a million Bruschi moments from the biggest games the way you can with Edelman. My favorite Bruschi moment, they're looking for the football. They ain't got it.
That's a classic. And if you're a Patriots fan of a certain age, you will remember that.
They ain't got it. I call him 2 times Teddy Bruschi because he does say everything 2 times.
We can get into some of the omissions a little bit later, but that was really my number one question about the top 5.
Gronk, 6, 7, and let me call up the list, which should be readily accessible because I've been sitting on it for weeks. Okay, 6 is Gronk. 7 is Matt Light. These are the guys who are following the holy trinity of perfect Patriots. At 3, 4, and 5 was Bruschi, Edelman, Brown. Then we go Gronk at 6, Matt Light at 7, Richard Seymour at 8, would-be Hall of Famer, Devin McCourty at 9, and Mike Vrabel at 10. Gronk, shortest tenure among the top 6 guys, certainly the most decorated behind Brady. He didn't play in the Super Bowl in 16, excuse me. They win that. But you look at Gronk, he was 9th in 2015. He's up now, 4-time All-Pro. I guess I just couldn't put him ahead of those perfect Patriots.
And I understand that because we talked about how the end of his tenure here in New England would work against his culture score potentially. And so I'm okay with him here. I probably would have had him. I don't know how my list would have looked, Tom, but he just felt like a top 5 guy to me because of the fact that he's a Hall of Fame player. And, you know, they don't win those Super Bowls that they won in 14 and 18 without him. And I do think, and I don't know if this makes the culture score. I keep calling it, I've called it patriosity. You had a great word for it that I've forgotten now.
Patriotism.
Is it patriotism?
It was patriotism.
Okay. Well, if his patriotism score might be made awash by the fact that he did do other things that made him a good Patriot, right? I mean, coming back from rehab, you know, after rehab, you know, taking that initial contract, that long-term deal, you know, maybe we should be giving some credit to Drew Rosenhaus for that one, but that was a deal that became incredibly team friendly just a couple years into it. So, you know, again, maybe it's a wash. He's not on the Brown, Edelman, Bruschi level as far as that stuff goes, but he was so good as a player. He deserves to be at 6. And I could see an argument to maybe make him even a little bit higher than that.
I mean, there's people who say he should be 2 instead of Wilfork. And Wilfork is a culture thing. Here's the interesting thing about Wilfork, and Gronk actually adopted a little bit of this too. Wilfork came of age in a time when Bill Belichick was not yet a deity. Okay. And as a result, Wilfork was able to, from 2000 through 2014, as was Mankins, as was McGinest, as was Vrabel, give pushback to Belichick. Since 2014, when Wilfork went someplace else, there really hasn't been anybody else who could be kind of the pushback guy, except for Brady, who is a planet unto himself, really. He's not a normal player on this team. But I think that Gronk, because of his alignment with Brady, became empowered by Brady to say, look, Bill's kind of screwing you here, Rob. It's time for you to do what's best for Rob. And when Rob did that, when Rob Belichicked Belichick, I think that Belichick took exception, because nobody, of all the people that you would think of, the one who was regarded as the doofus, the rube, ends up being the one who twists a knife on Belichick the way Belichick twisted it on the Mankins and the Jamie Collinses and the Seymours over the years. And that's why I think Belichick, you know, when he's discussing George Kittle last year and says, yeah, it's the best tight end in the league, I don't think there's any question that I've never coached a tight end as good as George Kittle. I mean, you know, Kirk Ferentz, this was a 5th-round pick if you knew he was so friggin' good. Or are you trying to make a point about Gronk? I mean, Gronk, Belichick, but he ends up 6th because of the patriotism, Phil.
I look at the rest of the top 10 and I think Matt Light is sort of Vince Wilfork light in a way, you know, right? In terms of bridging that gap again, and not quite the player league-wide viewed the same way as Wilfork was, but still very good. 3 Pro Bowls, 1 All-Pro, I think in 07. And so a really, really rock solid football player on top of being a culture guy.
There's a question there. Why is Seymour behind Light? Is that where you're going?
A little bit, because I think if you were a Hall of Famer, would you have him? If he had been in the Hall of Fame, is there any way where maybe your brain would just be so dialed into that yellow jacket that
I don't think so,
forced to push him up?
I don't think so, because quite possibly one of my closest friends since I've ever covered the team, and I don't want to be making friends out there, but best relationships I've had is with a guy who's not in the top 10, but is in the Hall of Fame, and that's Ty Law. And the reason is Light was here longer than Seymour. So that extended period of time, even though Seymour did what he did in terms of league-wide recognition, Light gave more years of service, high level service until he retired. Additionally, with Matt Light, almost never missed games. And when he did miss games in 2005 and 2009, the team went 20-12 over the period of time when he wasn't playing in regular season games. We're talking corner, quarterback, left tackle. After that, we can argue what the most important positions are. But Matt Light played left tackle, and left tackle is more important than 3-technique defensive end. I love Seymour. And I didn't want to get into downgrading people, but that's why, I'm saying that Richard Seymour is not good when I say that, but no, I'm not. I'm just saying left tackle to the blind side of Tom Brady. It's important. And if you do it for 3 more years, even if you weren't an all-pro every year like Seymour was and headed for the Hall of Fame, for this franchise, you get one notch above Richard Seymour, the great Richard Seymour.
Yeah, and I think the fact that they're separated by, obviously, these guys are extremely close in your mind. So it's not like, we're arguing a guy's at 7 and a guy's at 27. I think for Seymour, he might have been the best defensive player on a team that won Super Bowls because of its defense in large part. Right. And so I could see people saying, well, Light was good, but man, Brady's getting it out of his hand in 1.8 seconds anyway, half the time. And I know he saw a lot of, Dwight Freeney, but Seymour is going to go to the Hall of Fame. And so I get that argument. Tom, I look at the top 10 though, and we're going to get to this guy soon, but there are only going to be 3 locked in Hall of Famers that are coming out of this era.
Mm-hmm.
As we know it, at least right now. 2 of them are in your top 10. The kicker isn't.
Right.
Where's the kicker?
Kicker's coming up. He's going to be in my second 10, and he actually stays basically in the same spot that he was in No, he doesn't. He drops out of the top 10. So we're going to get to Adam Vinatieri in a second. Before we get to him, and he's going to be at 15 in our top 20. We're going to go today, folks. We're going 1 through 20. And then later in the week, as the unveiling continues, we're going to do 21 through 50. So you get that pod, and we don't annihilate you with 50 different conversations because you guys are into it and we love it. But Deb McCourty's at 9, and I have McCourty there because of length of service and what he did in 2020, Phil. I mean, the guy's played 23 playoff games. He started every single game in his career, regular season and playoffs, except for 5. It's like 169 of 174 possible regular season games, plus 23 playoff games. He is the head of security at the back end of the defense. He's what helps Stephon Gilmore be who he was, and Aqib Talib be who he was, and Revis do what he did, and Chung do what he did. So very underrated. And I think 2020 in some ways for his patriotism score, Phil, he suffered a personal tragedy with the loss of a child who was he and his wife Michelle had a baby who they lost. So that was working on him, as well as his social consciousness and his involvement in a very, very mobilized and intense way in so many different things. And so the entire racial uprising that went on last year, in addition to the pandemic, the Patriots needed him. Devin McCourty last offseason was as important as Bill Belichick to this team. And whatever this team does in 2021, and I don't know what it'll be, the culture stayed together because of the cement, not glue, the cement that Devin McCourty provided it through an unbelievably difficult year and with great personal sacrifice.
And I think this...
You buying that?
I am. I think the fact that he is in your top 10 is in a way encapsulates what makes your list, Tom Curran's top 50 Patriots, your list. Because anybody could look at it and say, oh, Pro Bowls, Hall of Fame, All Pros, stats, rack them up, slap them together. Let's take a look. Okay. How is McCourty there? Over Ty Law, right? But your list factors in the other stuff that requires a lot of understanding, a lot of history with the team. There's a lot of nuance there.
Yeah,
and
people got to trust me on this stuff.
Well,
I mean, I'm
when
not saying they have to agree, but they got to trust me that there's some thought going into these.
there is. And I wonder, I think McCourty is the kind of guy who would look at this and be like, wow, really? Top 10?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like,
I'm ahead of Willie.
Willie's there. Rodney. I mean, man, I mean, thanks, Tom, but yeah, but it's legitimate, and I think he deserves to be there.
Mike Vrabel, people are sadly might be forgetting how friggin' good he was. Pass rusher, run defender, interior guy, linebacker, edge player, tight end, and not just as a novelty act. I mean, a legitimate goal line threat that could not be stopped with 10 touchdowns in his career on 10 receptions. I don't think people have a concept of how good a player he was and how much more productive he was than some of the guys people will be asking about, i.e. Willie McGinest or Dante Hightower. Dante Hightower, in basically the same length of time, has 25 sacks and an interception. Over the same period of time, basically, Vrabel had 48 sacks, 13 forced fumble, and 11 picks. 17 playoff games, he had 8 sacks, 88 tackles, 3 forced fumbles, and a clubbing of Kurt Warner that led to Tyler's touchdown, pick 6. It's just, and he never made a mental mistake, and he played special teams. Vrabel, to me, is kind of a layup top 10 guy.
Yeah, I'm wondering if I can find a way to work him up the list. I know the list is already in stone here, but
throw him up ahead of Matt Light. Can't.
I don't know if you're going to find maybe
time served.
Time served though, and I think that matters. He's not in that perfect Patriot trio inside the top 5, but he's damn near a perfect Patriot. I know maybe in terms of him towing the party line and how it ended here wouldn't put him in that category. But when you think about versatility, productivity, playing his best in big games, the guy did being just an intelligent football player, playing situational football. I mean, the guy did everything that Bill Belichick wants, I think, in a football player, honestly. And he also kind of represented, Tom, this wave of players that Belichick brought in that weren't who they were until they got here. Right. He was a 3-4 outside linebacker in a
buried behind Levon Kirkland and Joey Porter and all those guys.
And he comes here and they change the scheme and it's a perfect fit. So to me, he's a lock to be in the top 10. And yeah, I might have Light and Vrabel flipped, or I might have Seymour and Light flipped and then Vrabel up there somewhere. But yeah, I think he has to be in the top 10. So you're not going to get any argument from me with him there.
All right, let's get into a great conversation about the next 5 guys. This is, to me, a lot of fun. 10, we just did it. 11 is the great Ty Law. Number 12, it's Willie McGinest. Number 13 is Hightower. 14, Rodney Harrison. 15, Adam Vinatieri. And then we're going to get to the next 5 right after. But with Ty Law, Hall of Fame player, why is he there, having been a Hall of Famer, having been a bridge guy from Parcells to Belichick, et cetera? Well, I hated to drop him, and he was 7 last time around. But we got guys who jumped ahead in McCourty, Edelman, and Gronk. But he really had just 5 years under Bill, 2000 through 2004, then went to the Jets, and he didn't play after the 7th game of the season in 2004 because he blew his ACL. So he didn't play in that Super Bowl in 2004. So 2 active Super Bowls for Ty, and the time was brief. So as a result, that's why one of my favorite Patriots ends up on this list at number 11.
I think that is fair. And if this were a list of just Tom Curran's top 50 Patriots of all time, he'd probably be higher than 11.
Oh,
right? Yeah. Just of everything he did before Belichick got here.
Yeah.
So it's this list is a headache, man. I mean, I give you credit because these next 5, you could argue, all 5 of these guys, 11 through 15, deserve to be in the top 10, just for different reasons. But but Law at 11 makes sense to me because of the tenure. I think people forget about that. It really, that, yes, he has 3 rings. He was really a part of 2 of them. And then he was moved on, right? I mean, and he goes to, I mean, that, do you factor how it ended with Ty against him at all?
Ty was Ty though. And I think the Ty, yeah.
I mean, he didn't, like, it wasn't a Rob Gronkowski thing, but he did.
No, it was.
Well, it wasn't the same in that he threatened to retire and
no, but he was tough on Bill. He was tough on me.
Oh yeah.
He was a headache, but no, it's strictly a tenure thing. I want to hit McGinest and Hightower because there's been a lot of conversation about that. Why is McGinest not in the top 10?
That was one of your big debates, McGinest versus Hightower.
Yeah. And McGinest, from the age of 29 in 2000 through 34, was a more consistent and productive player than Hightower. We'll just run through the little column that I wrote accompanying this. 87 games. He had 3 picks, 6 forced fumbles, 6 fumble recoveries, 38 and a half sacks, 238 tackles, and 60 tackles for loss in the regular season in 6 years. Okay. Here's Hightower from 2012 to 2019, 25 sacks as opposed to whatever I said it was up there, 38 and a half. 1 pick, 2 forced fumbles, 5 fumble recoveries in 8 years. He's got those huge plays, but I can't put those postseason plays over McGinest's Lewis and Clark credentials, overall regular season performance, and just the role that he played in the culture setting that ultimately was passed down to Hightower, and Hightower continues to pass on now to the Uches and the Jenningses and so on.
Yeah, I'm glad this is one of the reasons why it was so good you talked to so many people as you're putting this together, because while I think it was a factor for you, I'm not sure we focused on it as much until you talked to Christian Fourier, this Lewis and Clark element to the thing, because it had to have been, there was an added level of difficulty there, just in terms of being willing to buy in.
And that's illustrated with Law. I mean, Law kind of illustrated it, that push-pull. They wanted Bill to be their coach. And then when they found out, like with Lawyer, that Bill could be a real dink, then can we still, even though he's being a dink on contracts and I'm starting to hate him, can we still buy in on Sundays and perform? So yeah, I mean, that they had to Willie had to keep putting his arm around guys or grabbing them by the shirt and saying, we just keep playing though.
And this is a guy who, maybe unlike Ty, if we were talking about his entire Patriot tenure, it was not as impressive leading up to the Belichick era, right? He was a little bit of a disappointment as a really high end pick. Who just didn't have those kinds of numbers that you'd expect.
Same thing with Hightower. I mean, Hightower, after the 2013 season, there were plenty of people lamenting how poor he was in coverage and how much of a disappointment he had been.
Well, Willie was a top 5 pick though, right?
Right. And but I'm saying with Hightower, there was a lament. Like Willie did his thing in 95 and 96 to a point where people are like, well, he's really good. Hightower, I think there was a belief that he wasn't good.
Right. I remember that. And I think there was a wheel route against Miami or something, and he was supposed to cover back out of the backfield, and the guy was 260 pounds. Like, that's not really
right.
Not his thing. And to Bill's credit, I think he's kind of changed the defense where you don't see a lot of Patriots linebackers in coverage all that often anymore. I mean, even Willie used to drop. He was playing on the edge all the time, which Hightower doesn't, which, I think just to give you my take on these two, I look at it this way. Like, I give Willie the regular season advantage and the Lewis and Clark advantage. I give Hightower the playoff advantage and a little bit of the versatility advantage. I think being able to play in the middle of the defense is so important to what Bill Belichick wants to do that I would value that. And so I might have these two guys flip, but it is so ridiculously close that I get it.
If Hightower were playing for the Steelers, he'd have been an all-pro multiple times. And Hightower could have played in the 2000s. Whereas there's plenty of guys on here who might not have been. Hightower with his size, speed combo. I mean, Hightower and Vrabel are kind of similar too. But we belabor. Rodney Harrison, the great. Without him coming in 2003, I don't know if they win in 2004. And you talk about a guy who washed up on shore, bought into the culture, and then put the paddles to the Patriots' chest. He's that guy. And he was a brilliant player in his 6 seasons here. But his length of service for the Patriots was 6 seasons. He was an all-pro, but not a Pro Bowler, which speaks to how people regarded him as his colleagues around the league. Not a huge fan of him, but absolutely deserved to be an all-pro and probably should have been a Pro Bowler plenty of times. Adam is at 15.
There he is.
So he's headed for the Hall of Fame. He's got landmark kicks. He was the rock thrown into the water, as we could say, that caused the ripple effect of everything that happened after it. But he wasn't here for a long time under Bill. Gone after the 05 season. So that's why he's there. And, he's also a kicker. Somebody has to walk out there with his balls, draped across the guillotine. And he did it. Never.
I wonder, let me ask you this. I know it's dangerous to try to get inside the mind of Bill Belichick. Is there any chance he would have Adam Vinatieri ahead of Ty Law? And not, both these guys had contract issues, right, by the end. But, the way Bill Belichick talks about Adam Vinatieri, he was more than just a kicker. He was a football player, and he worked out with those guys in the weight room and, talk about playing your best in the biggest moments. And I wonder if he understands how important we've been talking about this with the Gilmore stuff going on, but he understands how important a lockdown corner is. And yet, do you think there's a chance he'd put the kicker over the corner here?
Oh, I think there is a chance, because here's something about the mentality and psychology of the Patriots that I think that I feel comfortable saying and believing it to be the case. If you're a young player on a team and you look over at the other field during training camp when it's 91 degrees and you're sweating your balls off and you're wondering how you're ever going to make it through the camp, and you look over and you see the kicker, the punter, and the holder grab assing, you're going to say, oh, this guy. That didn't happen with Gostkowski. That didn't happen with Vinatieri. Those guys were able to, even if you looked over at them, they weren't getting a free ride, nor were they giving themselves a free ride. So that to me is part of the culture too, because all these guys have to pass on the hard work, tough guy, stoicism, and Vinatieri did that. So, Phil, now we're getting to some,
Next 5?
Yeah, next 5. Let's get into some fun ones. We're gonna go Matt Slater at 16, followed by Kevin Faulk at 17, James White at 18. 19 is your offensive answer to Hightower. It's Dion Branch. And 20, Stephen Gostkowski. So we got a spate of special teamers coming at you. Phil, thoughts?
I think we are definitively into a new tier here, right? Because I don't think you would put any of these guys, whereas 11 through 15, I would be cool with any of those guys in the top 10.
Yep.
We're not putting anybody 16 through 20 into
right.
that
We've
same
turned the page. We've turned the page to you had to be watching the Patriots to understand how friggin' good these guys were.
Yes, and important, and they all were. You know where my eyes are going right away. Do you want to talk about Matthew Slater first, though? Because the running backs is where I'm focused. But Slater, to me, I think people are going to look at this and they're not going to give him enough credit as a player. Maybe they will because they're Patriots fans and they know everything about these guys. But this guy's going to go down as one of the best special teamers ever.
Let me run you through the resume. 13 years he's been here. He's been an all-pro special teamer twice. And we understand how important field position is because the Patriots, every team covets it, but Slater's personally responsible for bringing it. 9 times a Pro Bowler at that spot. There's only one guy who makes the Pro Bowl as the cover guy. He's won 3 Super Bowls. He's played in 4 of them. He is very similar to McCourty in terms of being the conscience of the team. You want to look at a guy for try and be like him as a human. it's been Matt Slater, and he's articulated it, and he's backed it up, and he's done the training, and he does the intensity that I talked about with Vinatieri, but he also performs in every single way that the Patriots need him to. So no bone to pick with Slater, I would imagine, Philly.
None. And he does a job where you are required to be at a full sprint while in hand-to-hand combat with somebody who now at this point in Slater's career is 10 years younger than he is, or
And
more.
sometimes two guys.
So a lot of times two guys. I mean, this is the focus every single week of every opponent's special teams unit. And it's stop Slater, stop Slater, stop Slater. And still he's the first one down, and he's the first guy to the ball, or he's the first one downing the ball inside the 5. Like, what he has done and his longevity is incredibly impressive. And I think it does speak to the work. And if you want a guy to build your culture around, it can be a guy who only might play 12 plays in a game, but because of everything he does off the field and the example he sets, your team's going to be better off for having that guy.
Perfect segue to the running backs. Because of all the things he does, Kevin Faulk is at 17, whereas James White is at 18. Make your case.
I would have White ahead of Faulk because of the playoff performances. It really comes down to that, because you've done a very good job of it. I wrote about it. Actually, I think last year or 2 years ago, we did the Great Patriots Debates series. That was a summer series that we wrestled with a couple years ago. And what stood out to me when I did this, because I think you basically said, will you just do this one? Because I'm tired of arguing with you about Faulk and White. Just you do it yourself. All right. So when you look at the regular season statistics, they match up. Now, this was a couple years ago, so White's numbers may be impacted, but they were almost identical in terms of the averages, like yards per carry, even though Faulk had more.
It's only gotten better. It's only gotten better for White too, in terms of had an 80 catch season. Faulk was never the hub of the offense in a way that James White and Julian Edelman had to be when Gronk was hurt or gone. So
even I called the regular season stuff in terms of the overall performance kind of a wash. And then I just looked at performances like obviously the 2016 Super Bowl, the divisional round in the 2018 Super Bowl run, where he, was one of the best players on the field and was, what do you have, 16 catches that day or something. Mm-hmm. So like he had single game performances in the postseason that eclipsed statistically any full Super Bowl run that Kevin Faulk had.
So did Shane Vereen. That to me is here's the reason though, because Shane Vereen wasn't here after that. James White or Shane Vereen were able to do that because of Kevin Faulk, because of Dave Meggett, but because of Kevin Faulk. Kevin Faulk took that position to a different level in the Patriots offense. And I think you can hear their teammates when they talk about it that we've spoken to, whether it be Zolak or Fourier. And I think if you put Tom Brady and hit him with the truth serum, he'd say the same thing. There was nothing that James White could do that Kevin Faulk did not. There were many things: running between the tackles, returning kicks, returning punts, and blitz pickup and pass blocking that White just didn't excel at the way Faulk did. Faulk is better at all those things. Plus, he was here for 13 years, whereas White was here for 7. That position against the cover 3 defense, that spot that White played, he showed up. He had a great Super Bowl. He had 20 friggin' points. He deserves to be in the top 20 because of that performance. And they played against another defense with the Los Angeles Chargers, and he did it again because that's the way the defense looks. That's why if you look back at 2014, Shane Vereen was out of his mind against the Seattle Seahawks in that Super Bowl because they give you that throw. I'm not diminishing the fact that he did it, because in 2015, when he was thrown to 15 times against the Denver Broncos, James White couldn't come up with the ball because he wasn't good enough yet. In 14 and 15, he wasn't a good player. Well, you know what? Kevin Faulk wasn't good in 99 and 2000. These guys are mirror images. Faulk is here because of time served, those other little nuances, and that patriotism. But I mean, you can't even say that James White isn't a great Patriot.
Oh, no, not at all. And I think if White was more vocal, people would people would think of him in a different light. He's just so quiet. It's hard to say that we really know the guy all that well. And I would love to hit Tom Brady with the truth serum, because I've heard him talk, and we're not going to compare Brady quotes on any of these guys because he loves them all. But man, the way he talks about James White, dependable. The best teammate you could ever ask for. I've heard Ivan Fears. I mean, Ivan Fears is another guy who, when he talks about sort of the pantheon of running backs, a couple of years ago, he said, there's nobody on our team that knows the offense other than Tom Brady as well as James White. And I think he's rare, but he's so quiet. He's so understated that we don't think about him that way. And so I just give him, I think Faulk gets a lot of credit for being a clutch guy. And I know there are a lot of, third downs that happen in the regular season that lead to wins, and playoff games that lead to wins that don't stand out as much as the game-winning touchdown run in 2016 for James White.
Mm-hmm.
But there is something to, I mean, the reason we have this list is because of Super Bowls won. And James, you don't win a Super Bowl without James White 2016. I'm not sure you can say that about Kevin Faulk and any of the three.
What I'm saying though, but you don't win in 2014 without Shane Vereen. I mean, this is right place.
But Shane Vereen has done so much less than either of these guys. I mean, these two
but
guys
I'm
are
saying,
comparable
don't make it sound like James White was doing something fantastic. It's the epitome of right place, right time, third down back in the Patriots offense with Tom Brady at quarterback.
Why couldn't Kevin Faulk do it? Like he was never the centerpiece of the offense in those big games the way James White was. Because
it was a different kind of offense then. It was more meat and potatoes, run the football. This was a spread by the time James White and Shane Vereen there. It was Tom Brady's, the 2010 to 2019 period of time for Tom Brady was
Faulk was there in 07. Faulk was there in 07.
Like 9,000 years old.
He was a little Yoda running.
Be that as it may, we're not moving off Kevin Faulk. Here's a guy who, this is good, and I'm going to preview the list. You're going to notice Deion Branch here is at 19. There's a receiver who I had at 16 the first time around. He gone. He not in the top 20 now. Randy Moss has dropped down behind Deion Branch. Why? Well, because what Deion Branch did has kind of gotten lost in the mothballs. He was out of his mind in the 2003 and 2004 Super Bowls, winning the Super Bowl MVP in 2014. He also jump-started the AFC Championship game win with the 60-yard touchdown reception. When you look at the numbers, and he had a 998-yard season, never had a 1,000-yard season. But Deion Branch helped them win 2 Super Bowls in much the same way Dante Hightower helped the team win 3, or James White helped them win 1. You don't win those Super Bowls unless Deion Branch is on the field. So
he gave them something a little different too. It felt like before they got to that 07 era where it was like, whoa, this is what an explosive receiver looks like. I mean, and Troy was Troy and could do so many things on the field, but it just felt like Branch gave them an extra gear.
It was the first toy that Brady had.
Yeah.
Tom Brady's first toy. And the interesting thing is, when the Patriots said enough is enough with whipping it down the field and having Randy maybe try and maybe not try in 2010, and they shipped him off and they replaced him with Deion Branch. Deion Branch spent 2 more useful seasons with the team and helped them out and let them get their mojo back. That's why Deion Branch is a top 20 player for me. And don't you ever forget it. Number 20, we're going to wrap up this pod with Stephen Gostkowski. 14 years with the Patriots, 1 All-Pro, 4 Pro Bowls, 3 Super Bowl wins, 5 Super Bowls overall. God damn, why didn't they let him kick that field goal in 2007 on 4th and 13? I mean, you're playing lights out defense as it is. It's not like the Giants were going to do great things with that offense, with that field position. Just a misstep. Be that as it may, I love the fact that Gostkowski had a game-winning field goal in the Super Bowl 53.
Oh, man, I feel like he needed it in terms of his own personal legacy. He would never say that he needed it. But I think in terms of how people look at him, do you think is he a top 20 guy without that kick? You know what I mean? What do you think?
Probably just looking at the guys I'm going to start hitting next. I had him at 19 previously, and that was in 2015, and he did have some good years. but
Oh, yeah.
would he be ahead of some of these guys that we're about to hit in the next couple of days? The Chungs, Ninkovich, Mankins, Mosses, Pfeiffers, Copens. We'll find out. We actually will not find out because he's there.
He's there. He's there. He's there. And this is what, again, I articulated earlier why this is a perfect Tom Curran's top 50 Patriots list. I think this would be, I'm not saying you and Bill Belichick are going to see all of these guys similarly, but the fact that we've got 3 special teams guys in the top 20 is very definitive of the Bill Belichick era, which is what you're defining here as well.
We're trying to do. Who were the definitive Patriots and the best players who contributed the most? All right. We're going to come back with 21 through 50 later this week. Hope you enjoyed it. We love the conversation. Hit us up, whether it be through Twitter. I got to get some Instagram going. Whatever you want to do. Just comment right here and give us a review. We love when you do that. We'll check you out later in the week. Thanks, Billy.